Have you heard of the Golden Boar cult? Yesterday, my grandma Bonnie sent me a text message to say, "Happy belated birthday, my grandson." Her message was about a week late, but this isn't too unusual. She's always been late. In fact, like most people my age, I've never had much of a relationship with my grandmother. She's from an older generation where family is everything, yet emotional availability is a weakness. Or something like that. Personally, I've never understood her, and I don't think anyone in my family ever has. Bonnie is my dad's mother. There weren't many stories about her growing up. Bonnie is more of a go along to get along kind of person. She wasn't the main character of anyone's childhood stories. Kids need something? They just ask their father, my Grandpa Melvin, who's always been the resourceful kind in any situation. Actually, I'm not even sure how or why Grandpa Melvin married her. He's such a larger-than-life character. He's the cool dad who every adolescent boy dreams their dad was. Then there's Bonnie, who for the most part lingers around like a ghost in the background. Around the holidays, Bonnie was always the last to send holiday cards, and always late to birthday parties. Maybe it's her intention, but no one pays her much mind. She always keeps to herself, for the most part. All I've known about Bonnie was that her father, Great-Grandpa Jack, was a wealthy veteran. Something about him being a high-ranking Air Force general. Anytime Bonnie's name is mentioned in conversations, my dad always says, "Oh, you know your great-grandpa Jack was a pretty important man, don't you?" And someone asks, "Oh, really? How important?" To which my dad always responds with, "Grandpa Jack briefed the president on confidential matters and attended his dinner parties. That's how important." Great-Grandpa Jack passed away before I could ever meet him, but I always heard stories about him. Jack passed January 3rd while I was born February 3rd. My mom used to joke that Jack couldn't handle hell, so he crawled back into the land of the living through me to finish paying his dues. The only connection I ever had with my grandma Bonnie was when she'd show me all these medals and governmental correspondences that were signed by powerful men that Grandpa Jack saved during his time in the military. To be honest, it never really piqued my interest. What the hell did I care? As a kid, all that ever interested me was when my favorite shows were on and getting home from school to cool down with some boxed juice and crackers. Anyway, getting back to the text my grandma sent me. All of this kind of hit me when I saw her message. Call it a grandson's guilt, but I felt the need to try and open up to her a little now that I'm older and more mature. I've been thinking, maybe I'm the chosen one, and I can crack the case on this strange woman. We've been texting back and forth, and I'm very interested in what I can get out of her. It's been a few days since my first entry. My grandma Bonnie was so happy to hear from me that we've made a habit of texting each other. I guess now would be the time to mention that I live across the US from where my family lives, so meeting my grandma or any of them isn't feasible. Instead, I asked her if she wanted to call me so we could talk over the phone, but she declined. She told me she doesn't trust her voice being cataloged onto a database somewhere. At first, that made me laugh. What the hell does she mean by that? But as our correspondences continued, I learned that most of her instincts came from her father and things he'd tell her while she was growing up. It sounds like Great-Grandpa Jack impressed a lot onto her, especially since Bonnie never knew her mother, something I asked her more about. No one knows who Grandma Bonnie's mother is, My family always told me that she disappeared by Bonnie's 3rd birthday. All we know is her name was Eva, though Jack insisted that might not be her actual name. My mom would always whisper about what a tragedy this was. It's why we all let Bonnie be Bonnie. Aloof, stoic, and isolated to her own little world. No one ever blamed my grandma for not being around much. We all figured it came from a place of abandonment. My dad said Grandpa Melvin never discussed Bonnie's family in front of anyone. It was something she didn't want anyone to mention. Dad said that she never told him anything outside of how important Grandpa Jack was. Luckily, Dad was alive to hear Jack's stories from his own mouth. Learning this made me consider how intimate it was that Bonnie shared Grandpa Jack's memorabilia with me when I was a kid. I called my dad up about all of this. To my surprise, he had no idea that Bonnie showed me Jack's medals. He sounded shocked and a bit offended, saying that his mom never even let him in the same room as the keepsakes. Your grandma didn't like telling us about any of that. We heard it all from Jack, and that was fine enough. Your Auntie Lorraine was the most interested in the mystery of your grandma, but Bonnie wouldn't have it. It took a while of convincing, but sometime after your auntie graduated high school, I think Mom had a stern talking to her, because Lorraine finally dropped it and never mentioned it again. This was all very enlightening to me, and if I'm honest, it made me feel really special that my grandma felt comfortable enough to share those things with me in confidence. To think that she never even shared Jack's honors with her own children. What's that all about? Bonnie was a loving, supporting mother, I hear. Why was that a bridge too far? It's not like she hated her kids or anything. My family isn't special or anything. I mean, really, who knows anything about their family at all? For example, I felt like I knew my dad really well. I can tell you where he grew up, the names of the woman he dated before he found my mom, which jobs he held, and even what songs played on the radio when he was my age. Yet I couldn't tell you how shocked I was that my dad never mentioned much about his relationship to Grandma Bonnie, or that I was the only one granted clearance into Jack's private artifacts that her kids were forbid from even mentioning. How much do I actually know? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's to ask my grandma, who seems to quietly have the keys to our family's secrets. It's been almost a week since my last update, but I thought I'd get this down before I forget. So, as laid out in my previous entry, I decided to inquire further to see if there was anything else my grandma was willing to share. At first, our conversations remained fairly mundane. She was telling me about her day. She'd been seeing a doctor about a hip replacement, so her messages slowed down at first. Skipping all that, I asked her about Auntie Lorraine, who was really interested in our family. The following messages were kinda weird. I'll share them as she sent them. Did Lorraine or your father ever tell you about what happened to your Uncle Robert and his love affair with an evil woman named Inez King? Of course your father wouldn't say anything to you. We told him Robert joined the Air Force and ran off with that wicked woman. Your father tries to be a good boy and keep his nose clean, but he knows we hid things from him. We taught him to be good like that. I'm sure you heard about your uncle. He was everything your father wasn't. This made me uneasy to read. For background, my Uncle Robert, or Bob as my dad calls him, is the eldest. My grandparents had 3 kids: Uncle Bob, Auntie Lorraine, and Jonathan, my dad. Uncle Bob disappeared when I was around 7 years old. He was a lot like Grandpa Melvin, funny, outspoken, and warm. My dad used to tell stories of Bob torturing him and Lorraine when they were kids, mostly playing elaborate pranks on them to inspire fear. My dad told me that Bob was a bad apple, but the kind of bad apple that's really fun to get drunk with after a bad breakup. He'd light the town on fire and blame the man for those sins. I tried to ask my dad about Bob's disappearance, even reading him the strange text message Bonnie sent me. My dad got really quiet, something I'm not used to, and told me he'd call me back. It's been 3 days, and I haven't heard back. I think I struck a nerve. Maybe it wasn't a good idea to read verbatim what Bonnie sent. He wasn't meant to hear it. It was meant for me. Since Dad proved a dead end, I decided to look up this name, Inez King, within Paradise, the small town my family grew up in. After hours of searching, nothing came up. I almost retired my search, but as fate would have it, I had local TV on in the background to soothe me, and a commercial came on. It mentioned a car dealership that's a town over that happens to have the same name as the city my great-grandpa Jack was originally from. Anyway, I remember hearing that Uncle Bob moved to a place with that name after he graduated high school to start a life of his own. This also happens to be the town where Jack was stationed at the beginning of his Air Force training. This town is kind of notorious for a lot of organized crime, murders, and disappearances. So for that reason, I'm redacting all names and information that could give it away. It's really not something I want to shine a light onto in regards to my family history. So I searched Inez King within that zip code and a lot came up. I was sent to a lot of old archive websites. After all, this used to be a major tourist town back in the day. It was upsetting to find 2 headlines that read, Satanic Rituals, Cult of Young Women Who Kill for Satan, and Daughter of Local Mayor Inez King, Tragic Car Accident Goes Unsolved. The articles were themselves very old. You can call them vintage, actually. The first article mentions an Inez, though with no last name. Apparently there was a private school that operated in this town that was a back door to a satanic cult. Or that's what the journalist suspects. Here's an excerpt from the article. For decades, this private school has remained a mystery within the hearts and minds of Redacted County. Started in 1888, Redacted, for young girls founded by Dr. Redacted, has been opened to house the daughters of legacy families from around the state. No one is clear on the details of their operation due to their exclusivity and militant policy around matters of privacy. Many have claimed it's one of the first all-girls school of its kind to operate in the United States, right here in our humble little town of Redacted. Rumors of Saturday night parties in which young girls gather to sacrifice livestock to Satan has followed this school since its grand opening, raising suspicions from local residents. The school declined to comment on these accusations. Local youth, Redacted, from Redacted, claims to have seen such a horrid night of shenanigans unfold before him. He describes, One evening, I was on my way home when I heard screaming, but it didn't sound like a human. At first I thought it was a baby, but it shrieked in a way you only hear in the movies. The shriek was coming from the woods. I was so startled, my heart nearly launched out of my chest, so I decided to investigate. That's when I saw a circle of people in and purple robes around a fire pit. They were rocking back. One of them was holding a goat that thrashed and screamed for its life. This person then beheaded it in front of a boar's skull. It was painted gold with red jewels for eyes. They let the blood fall into this lead bucket. I saw them all dip their hands into it and smear the blood all over their faces. It was pretty dark out, a new moon. I didn't get a good look at them, but they were definitely teen girls who seemed to think it was funny. I felt so nauseous and quickly got out of Dodge. Luckily, they didn't see me, but I'm pretty certain it was from the girls' school. After some investigative work, I learned the name of one of these girls who goes to redacted. Her name is Miss Inez, last name unknown. She's a young 13-year-old girl. One can only imagine she comes from a line of wealth and luxury to get into this very exclusive private school. I attempted to track her down to ask questions, but I couldn't. Soon after my revelation of the young girl's name, I was followed by unmarked black cars and harassed by a barrage of unknown phone calls. There's more to this article, but I only wanted to share the juicy details. I learned this journalist was very well respected in the area and helped police solve a bunch of cases throughout the years. Unfortunately, he killed himself about a month after he broke this satanic school story. According to his late daughter, he struggled with alcoholism, and he only got worse. She was convinced his demons finally caught up with him after he published that story. The harassment that followed was too much for him. The second story mentions Inez King by name. This is where I learned she was the daughter of the then mayor. The article talks about her untimely death at age 22, a night of partying gone wrong. Breaking. Miss Inez King, 22-year-old daughter of Mayor redacted King, was pronounced dead at 7:17 a.m. this morning, found brutally mangled in a ditch, from what police say was a car accident. One of the last people to speak to Inez King was her 27-year-old boyfriend, Mr. Robert redacted, a handsome young Air Force pilot. Mr. redacted recounts Miss King insisted upon attending her Saturday night sorority party in the Zeta Alpha Zeta house. The following morning, a good Samaritan, who wishes to remain anonymous, alerted authorities to the scene of the crash between Wexler and Donovan Way. Police found the young beauty queen's body left in a gruesome scene, her body severed clean in half, and her neck snapped in an unnatural manner. Onlookers say her internals were laid about everywhere for anyone to see, with her heart oddly missing. Police claim there is no suspected foul play. They suspect this is a classic case of drunk driving and bad luck during a darkened new moon night. Mayor King requested no comment at this time. However, his offices released an official statement mourning the loss of his daughter and need for privacy and prayer. There have been conflicting stories as to the night before the incident. Miss King's sorority sisters inform us that she was taken home by an unknown man and was not alone in that car. There are currently no suspects or further leads. Someone could argue with me that the Inez in the first article, who was 13 years old at the time, isn't the Inez King I'm looking for. However, after reading both articles and seeing my Uncle Bob mentioned, I know both articles are talking about the same Inez King. I've been searching for. I wasn't too sure what can of worms I opened. At this point, I was too nervous to send this information to my dad. Did he know my uncle's name was in this old story about his early girlfriend's tragic death? Probably not. I've never heard of Inez King. Clearly, she was an important person. The text between Bonnie and I have been less. She says she's been taking time to recover from her hip surgery that she got recently. Also, my dad hasn't gotten back to me at all. I think I pissed him off or something. He refuses to answer my calls or text back. Even my mom is avoiding me, so I gave up trying to contact them. I'm sure whatever it is, they'll get over it. Fortunately, I was able to ask my grandma a bit more about this Inez King situation. To which she responded, "Inez was a devil woman. She slaughtered helpless animals to get what she wanted. She took your uncle away from us and paid a price." Have you heard of the website? Redacted. Type in the date of Inez's death, and you'll find what you're looking for, I promise you. Be good, grandson. Just to be safe, I redacted the name of the website. It might be one of the last websites known to contain malicious pop-ups from a bygone era. I'm not taking any chances. Shocking. I didn't know my grandma knew how to navigate a search engine at all. Her recommending a website to me was wild. Anyway, I found what she was talking about. It looks like some secret governmental archive website. Or at least I've never heard of it, maybe it isn't secret. When I typed in the date of Inez's death, a whole database of PDFs came up. It looked like Inez was linked to several disappearances before her death, many men who she was involved with all vanishing. Not only that, but her father, Mayor King, had 12 wives. Every single one of them died from a slew of unfortunate circumstances. His first wife jumped off a bridge, the second died of pneumonia, and so on. What does that mean? I don't think that's normal, but who am I to say? Another PDF was a scan of an old handbook with a very detailed cover titled Signature of the Golden Boar, which immediately reminded me of the young boy who saw a goat sacrifice in front of a golden boar head. One of the first pages of the handbook had a ritual schedule of important celebrations. Turns out Monday, Loktos, Tuesday, Sangam, and Saturday, Grossis, were very significant days for this boar's head group. Unlike our holidays, they didn't really have any set days throughout the year. It just says, guidance will be given. This gave me the impression of a very tight-knit group that regularly met. Otherwise, how would they know? What really caught my eye was the strange statement page on their core philosophy that described who they were and what they were about. Secrets are to remain currency under order of Abroxos. The blood of your wounds granted you access to the binding words within this document after you were courted by signature a priori on Crossis. My child, we welcome you with open arms into your final chapter. Brothers and sisters, The signature of the Golden Boar is an exclusive club that's a part of a wider network of heads. Anyone reading this has been given access into our dwellings and rights. Congratulations. We believe there to be no God nor divine force in this world aside from power. Therefore, the whole of our law is to do and be what you may through strength. In a world of wickedness and evil where no higher power is found, we make power and give only our organization founded by Father Abraxos. Every feast held is a sacred rite to channel the darkness of this world into empowering yourself or your signature within this life. We believe only the most exclusive throughout humanity's history is worthy enough to wield this mighty sword and take these oaths. Only those tougher than lead can forge their own sword of conquest, to cut down their own path, leaving only his signature. We find that you are one of these people. Pity is an illusion. We win solely on strength. Lie to the weak, for they are the magnet of wickedness. Take no pity on those unworthy, for they will pluck your eyes out and feed it to the vermin of the earth, because only you hold the sword. This was more confusing than I was hoping for. Yet I found myself agreeing with their statement to a degree. Then again, that's how they get you, right? How did this document end up in this database? Was this the club Inez was a part of? The rest of the document was in code with strange drawings of animal dissections, seemingly with a critical focus on the heads of these animals. The drawings of the heads demonstrated careful detail to removing the eyes, the nose, the teeth, and even the brain. The animals depicted were a goat, a river dolphin, a dog, and a bird that I've never seen before. The other drawings were somehow more graphic, showing the proper way to dismember and blend together the rest of the animal into a meal, and how to organize that out on a table. The table itself was a layout of a human body, and they drew each piece of an animal placed neatly where you'd expect to find it on your body, but reversed. The table was rectangular. You had the diagram of the human drawn over it upside down. For instance, there was a cow brain in a bowl with a lunar symbol drawn above it placed at the lower hem of the table, rather than having it at the top. To be honest, I was getting a little sick looking at all of this. And as you'd expect, there was a drawing of a boar implicated in all of these step-by-step guides. It was drawn smiling, like a mischievous cartoon character, that felt unsettling given the subject matter. The fact I couldn't read it was upsetting. I'm sure they did that on purpose, so the uninitiated would be lost if they happened to find this. My mind was swirling with what kind of implications this had, not only on my missing uncle, but on a larger scale. Did Mayor King know about this? I messaged my grandma with the name of the group, the signature of the golden boar. It didn't take long for her to respond with an image. I'm still taken aback by this, but it was an image of one of Great-Grandpa Jack's Air Force patches. It was a black patch with a yellow boar's head, smiling and winking with the number 717 in red stitching under it. I remembered her showing me this patch when I was a kid. Some of the patches he had looked pretty standard, not all that interesting, but that one immediately came running back to me. I'd be lying if I said seeing that patch didn't bother me. Actually, the idea of thinking about it any further fills me with butterflies. I decided to leave that as is for now. She sent a message after the image. It said, "I assume you looked into King's father and the mess with his school, right?" So, that's where I am now, currently looking into this Mayor King character since any search of my uncle turns up nothing. It's now been a day and a half since my last update. It wasn't hard to find information on Mayor King. He was their mayor for almost a decade. Politically, he was pretty standard, yet people knew him and kept electing him out of habit, despite their suspicions of money laundering. Those claims were unfounded to my research, but I'll admit I quickly lost interest looking into that. The lead my grandma sent me wasn't as explosive as I'd hoped. I found the university Mr. King graduated from. He was a privileged frat boy that was involved with all things politics from the get-go. A little coincidental, but not crazy. However, the university's mascot was, you guessed it, a golden boar. I say was because they changed it 5 years ago to a peacock, which is quite a change if you ask me. Is that enough to say he was involved with this shadowy group, too? Hard to say, but it does look really suspicious. Obviously, any search for this signature of the Golden Boar group turned up absolutely nothing. As far as the internet is concerned, it never existed. Not even the PDF I found came up. I tried to look into any symbolism on the boar or a golden boar. There wasn't much. The boar is a wild pig. They're very powerful, secretive, and aggressive. Sometimes they eat other animals. Then there's how genetically similar we humans are to pigs. I assume this organization is trying to embody a powerful, undomesticated boar rather than a domesticated pig, which is probably us ordinary people. The implications of that sends a shiver up my spine the longer I sit on it. It was my grandma who thought to text me while I was looking into all of this. She said, "So you found their signature. Where do you think they received money from? When your uncle was going through his training, he told me he was invited to these fancy dinners every Friday night, hosted by the city. He never said what for. Food for thought. Stay safe." I really feel like I'm coming close to solving this mystery. Yet something tells me that I may not be happy with the answer. not because it's not satisfying, but because of what it means. There is an organization called Betterment of Academic Research, or Boar, that's helped fund many of these more private universities for decades, including Mayor King's University that his daughter was attending. The founder of this organization is Timothy M. Gold, who is also the founder of Engaging Aerial Training, or EAT, a group that advocates for young men to join the Air Force. They're actually very successful in what they do. Tim Gold is known to be a very wealthy and mysterious man, connected to all sorts of academic and military organizations throughout the United States. Sadly, Tim Gold passed away 7 years ago from a heart attack, so there's no way to contact him anymore. My grandma mentioned that Great-Grandpa Jack always wanted one of his grandsons to follow in his footsteps. It happened to be my uncle who stepped up. She said Jack knew Tim Gold. They were in the same fraternity and graduated college together. In fact, Bonnie texted me a photo of the whole family with Tim Gold, handing a young Bob a certificate after his high school graduation. Everyone was in the image. Bonnie, Melvin, Bob, Lorraine, and my dad, with this Tim Gold. She sent me a few others of Tim attending other events throughout my family's life. He was everywhere. He was an older gentleman like Grandpa Jack. He wore these large gold-rimmed aviators with these gold rings on his fingers. In a strange way, he felt so familiar to me, like I had seen him before. It turns out, Tim Gold was the man who took my Uncle Bob under his wing, helping him get into the Air Force, among other things, Bonnie said. She wasn't specific on what that meant. My mind was blown. How had I never heard about any of this? Dad never mentioned a wealthy benefactor who was really close to our family. No one mentioned it. Was that normal to not mention? Then there's these strange connections with the signature of the Golden Boar. Tim Gold is the one person who's the connective tissue to all of this. Yet there's hardly any information about him outside of fundraisers, and a few events where you can find his name signed on a registry. All of this happened so long ago. The internet doesn't really hold any info on stuff like this. My grandma then sent me a text saying, Mr. Gold was friends with the King family too. He would take your uncle to those private dinner parties that Inez loved so much. Everything kind of hit me at once as I read that. I had this horrible feeling in my gut that my uncle was somehow involved with Inez King's death, and that might have something to do with his disappearance. I have no way of proving it, but the more I think about all the hints she's been giving me, the more I think that's what she's saying. Today began in an ordinary fashion. I was ready to get another text from my grandma to finally get some solid answers, until I received a text message from an unknown number. It said, Jamie, is this your phone? This is your Grandma Bonnie. We've been trying to get a hold of you. Quickly, I called the unknown number, and my grandma answered. It was her. I mentioned to her we had been talking for a good month or so. She sounded really confused and said, "No, Jamie, my phone was disconnected over a year ago. Your grandpa bought me this phone a couple of days ago, and we've been trying to get a hold of you to let you know." My world was spinning. I had to sit down for a moment as the breath was knocked out of my lungs. Something wasn't adding up. There's no way. She apologized about not texting me a happy birthday this year, which added to my heart race. I felt a wave of hot air rush to my head as this sudden Twilight Zone reality punched me in the gut. Honestly, I was unable to play this casual game of small talk like nothing had happened. The question on my mind tumbled out of my mouth. "What's the signature of the golden boar?" My grandma's mood shifted so fast. She went quiet on the other line for almost a minute as I felt the weight of the question I just asked. The air was heavy, with something unsettling swirling around the white noise of the phone call. It terrified me. Her voice was distant when she finally responded. "You shouldn't know about them."